Hi there, Algebra 1 Essentials people. It's Miss Wade again, here with another video to kind of make sure you understand how to do some basic algebra. We started doing some algebra together this week, and I think that's kind of exciting. So I've got a little warm up here. I'm going to ask you to use mental math. In other words, try to find the value of the letter in each of these equations just by thinking your way through it. Go. Now, hopefully you paused the video because that wasn't enough time. But I want to get to this without the video being too long. So you can pause it if you need a little bit more time. When we look at each one of these four equations, we can see that there's a different situation going on in each one. And so we might have to use different mental math for each one. So for number one, if we take 14 and we want to know how to get to 22, well, we could use our fingers and we could just kind of think about it and say, well, okay, 14 plus, let's see, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Oh, 8 gives us 22. And so x equals 8. And then looking at 2, it's going to be a little tricky to count on my fingers because how many fingers plus 4 gives me 0 fingers? So I'm not really sure how I would solve that one counting on my fingers. So let me think of a different way. How about we think about, well, if I have $4, how many dollars do I have to give away before I have no dollars? And the answer is $4. So I'd have to give away $4. So A must equal -4. And then let's see, number 3 is slightly different from the other two. 11 minus what gives me 7? Well, I could start at 7 and count to 11, and that would give me the answer. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, it must be 4, so C equals 4. And then let's see, number 4, y minus 10 equals 12. Well, that one's going to be tricky to count out. Oh, maybe I could just take 10 and add it to 12, and that would give me the number. And so y is 22. Now, all of these answers that we're talking about here are correct. But notice that I had to approach each problem in a different way, which is exactly why people think that math is hard. And it is hard. But what makes math easier is recognizing that some rules, like the rules of algebra, are really pretty simple, and you just need to do the same things every time. And then you can solve any math problem. You don't have to do something different with every problem. You can just use the rules of algebra over and over and over again. And then you only have to remember the rules, those small number of rules, and then you can solve any math problem. Let me show you what I mean. Looking at number 1, we have 14 plus x equals 22. Now, we've been talking about how if we create a clever cancellation and do the same thing to both sides, we can solve any algebra problem. And as long as we just do that, remember to do those two things, we can solve this. Well, both sides of what? I like to draw a little line down so I know, right there at that equal sign, so I know what the two sides are. And if I want to get x by itself, I have to get rid of that 14. Well, that's where creating clever cancellations comes in. I want to cancel that 14 with something. Well, 14 minus what gives me nothing? 14 minus 14 gives me nothing. And then the second part of the rule is do the same thing to both sides. So since I minus 14 on one side, I have to minus 14 on the other, because that keeps the equation balanced, like you learned in Wednesday's video. And now I've created this cancellation here, which makes it go away. The x is still left on this side, and that equals 22 minus 14, which is 8. We created clever cancellations, we did the same thing to both sides, and we solved the problem and got the correct answer. With number 2, if we were using mental math, on a plus 4 equals 0, we had to do something different than what we did in number 1 to solve it. We had to think about it in a different way. But if we think about it in terms of just using algebra, creating clever cancellation and doing the same thing to both sides, we can do the exact same thing we did in 1, even though the problem is different. We want to solve for a. We see that there's a 4 there. So if we subtract 4 here, that's creating a clever cancellation. And then we have to remember to do the same thing to both sides. So now we've got our cancellation, and a is left on this side, and that equals 0 minus 4, which is -4. Again, we got the correct answer, and we didn't have to do anything different than what we did in number 1. We did the exact same steps. So it's not about remembering the techniques, it's about remembering the rules. Number 3 and 4 would get solved very much the same way. Number 3, 11 minus c equals 7. We could create a clever cancellation by subtracting 11 from both sides. Subtracting 11 and then doing the same thing to both sides by subtracting 11 from the 7. But here's where we run into the only complication that we're going to get into when we talk about remembering algebra rules. Because this 11 cancels with this 11, but nothing has happened to that minus sign. So it comes down. And that equals 7 minus 11, which is -4. Now, this is where we might run into a little bit of trouble, and we could say to ourselves, well, if negative c is -4, then positive c must be +4, and it is. But in that Wednesday video, we got a better way of looking at that, and we will do that later, but I just kind of wanted to stick to the point on the warm-up. And then 4, same thing. Y minus 10 equals 12. Create your two sides. We're subtracting 10 from this side, so we want to add 10 to do the opposite. Add 10 to both sides. These cancel. Y equals that 22 that we knew we were going to get anyway. The point of this warm-up is to tell you that math can be very difficult, especially if you think of it as you have to do something different with every single different problem. That would be impossible to be able to do it that way. It would be too hard. Instead, shift your thinking to remember that there are a few rules, and if you memorize those rules, better to just practice them enough so you memorize them, then you really only have to remember those two things. Create clever cancellations, do the same thing to both sides, and you can solve any algebra problem. All right, so we're going to keep solving these little simple equations, talking about making sure that we use the rules of algebra. We're just going to add to your notes. Hopefully you took some notes on Wednesday when you watched that video, and so you have a little bit more than you did on Monday. But even if you didn't, we're just going to keep adding. So get those notes out from Monday, and let's get going. A quick reminder, the math rules that are working behind the scenes are called the properties of equality, and we have 2 so far. The addition property of equality tells us you can add the same value to both sides of an equation. This property gives us the permission we need to use that technique when we cancel. You can add the same value to both sides of an equation. And the subtraction property works a lot like that one. You can subtract the same value from both sides of an equation. Again, this gives us permission to go ahead and use subtraction to keep our equations balanced, to create clever cancellations, but as long as we do the same thing to both sides, we're going to be okay. Okay, so let's talk about it. We have x plus 5 equals 2. And like we said that guy said in the Wednesday video, equations are like scales. You have to keep them balanced. If you throw an equation off balance, then it won't be true anymore. And so we have to keep saying true things. That's just good advice for life, really. So when we're going to solve this, we have to keep it balanced. We have to do the same thing to both sides, just like we did in the warm-up. It's the same rules over and over and over again. And you just take a look at the problem, you see where your variable is or your unknown, and then you get rid of everything around it. You do what you have to do to cancel stuff out and make sure you do the same thing to both sides. So clearly we have a 5 in the way. So what we have to do is subtract 5, because that will create a cancellation. And then we have to do the same thing to the other side. What did I write a 7 for? That's not right, Miss Waite. We have to subtract 5. Now we see that this cancels, and we have x on one side, and that equals negative 2 minus 5. That's where that negative 7 came from. It was the answer. Now the thing that's cool about algebra is that you never have to get any problem wrong, ever. Because you can just take this number that you just got for x, and you could put it right back in. And you could say, well, is negative 7 plus 5 equal to negative 2? Well, we could draw a number line and see if that's true. Let's see, starting at negative 7. If I go 5 units in the positive direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where do I end up? Well, here's negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, yep, negative 2. And I'm correct. So you can check your answers, is my point. You never have to get an algebra problem wrong because you just take the answer, you stick it back into the original equation and check yourself. That check step took me about, 30 seconds? It isn't terrible, and I suggest you do that on each and every problem so that you are getting 100% on these. And if you're wrong, you know to go back and see what mistakes you made. Okay, what about this one? 12 equals y minus 7. Now this equation looks different, there's different things going on, and that can be really intimidating. But if we remember to create two sides, create a clever cancellation, and do the same thing to both sides, we've already solved this. This goes away, we have the y on this side, and 12 plus 7 is 19. So 19 is our answer. Are we correct? Well, is this a true statement? Is 12 equal to 19 minus 7? It sure is, and so we know we're correct. And 100% on that one. Algebra has two simple rules to remember, and if you remember those, you can solve any algebra problem. All right, what about number 1? What would you do first? Well, what I would do first is create a little dotted line so I have a couple sides, but then what? Are you thinking you would subtract 6 from both sides? Absolutely right, me too. I want to get this x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 6. And I'm going to do it on this side also, because you have to do the same thing to both sides. These cancel. X equals 19 minus 6, which is, 13. Yeah, great. What about number 2? What would you do first? I hope you said you'd subtract 12, because in order to get y by itself, you want to get rid of the 12 that's with it. And the only way to do that is by subtracting 12. If you have 12 bucks, you have to get rid of 12 bucks in order to have $0, although I don't know why you would. But don't forget you have to do the same thing to both sides. And now these cancel. We have y on this side, and negative 5 minus 12 is negative 17. And we can check ourselves too. See if negative 5, is this a true statement? Is negative 5 equal to negative 17 plus 12? Well, yeah, it sure is, and so we know we have the correct answer. All right, here's one more. What would you do? We want to get m by itself. You have to get rid of that minus 3. So the best thing to do is to add 3. This is why I say create clever cancellations, because you have to pick the thing that'll work, and that's clever. Make sure you do the same thing to both sides. Cancels, m equals negative 11 plus 3. What is negative 11 plus 3? Well, I don't know off the top of my head. So why not draw a number line? Negative 11, positive direction, 3 places. 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. There's negative 10, negative 9, negative 8. and then you can check it. Is negative 8 minus 3 more, negative 11? Yep. So we have the correct answer. Remembering the rules of algebra is going to make your math much easier to remember. It's a few short rules instead of a different thing for every problem. Don't focus in on the problem so much. Think about the rules. All right, guys. So, Monday you did a Kahoot. Actually, Wednesday, you had a quizzes. Today, Friday, you have an assignment in Big Ideas Math. And there's only one assignment in there, you guys. And so that's the one you'll do. If you have not signed up for Big Ideas Math Fit, that's a problem, and you should get in there and do it. You should look at the assignment that says sign up for Big Ideas Math or something like that in Google Classroom and get that sign up done, because some of our assignments are going to be on that platform instead of doing Kahoots and quizzes all the time. All right, you guys, I hope that you have a nice day and that you have a nice weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye.